Hello. First time posting here, so here's my story. About 2 years ago, my husband, my brother, and I were vacationing at my family's vacation home in a rural area in western North Carolina. Our house is the last house on the top of a mountain. The nearest house can be off the front porch of the house, about 500 feet down the slope of the front house, with thick bushes and trees down the slope. Probably a 45-degree slope. This house is also a vacation home. No cars or visitors there the whole week that we stayed. Behind the house is a slope, straight up, with very thick woods, clear to the top, for about a mile. No other houses up that way. Anyway, it was about 10:30ish at night, in May, June. We were playing cards on the front porch, bright moon, and a low-lit porch light, just hanging out, and we hear large footsteps coming up the mountain slope from below. We all stop and look at each other. My brother stands up and says, "Hello," and we wait in silence with no response. About 3 minutes later, I started feeling really uncomfortable. My gut was telling me to go inside. I expressed my concern, and my husband and brother tell me to calm down, and I agree to play another round of cards. We hear the footsteps again, clearly something on 2 feet. This is about 8 to 10 minutes after the first footsteps. It was clearly closer this time, and we all stand and peer over the edge of the porch. We all see a tall figure standing on 2 legs, looking quite tall, about 30 to 40 feet away. It's very dark, and can't see any features other than large shoulders and a dark outline of whatever it was, and it smelt like crap, like a bear but worse. My husband runs inside and grabs his gun, while my brother and I back up and stand in the doorway. 10 seconds later, my husband comes out back onto the porch in the front, and he says, "Hey, is there someone out there? I have a gun. Please let us know if someone's there." No answer. About 2 minutes of silence goes by, and we all have a feeling of straight-up dread. It's not longer visible where it originally was, and we never heard another movement from it. We retreated inside once we all agreed that we felt extremely uncomfortable. My brother claims to have heard tapping on the walls that night while trying to sleep, but my husband and I didn't hear a thing. Let me know what you guys think it could have been. We have seen dogs, mountain lion, and bobcats on this property, but never anything else as far as large animals go. I'm happy to elaborate the best I can if somebody wants more of an explanation. So, I live in Arizona. Over the weekend, I went camping with my fiancée and her sister and husband. My fiancée is 4 months pregnant. We had a great time camping and fishing. I love fishing, and it's been one of my best coping mechanisms since I got out of the Army. Well, Saturday afternoon, we all went fishing on my soon-to-be brother-in-law's boat, had a blast and caught some fish, then headed back to camp. That night, I felt like going fishing again, because fishing at night is usually a good time, but no one else wanted to go, and my fiancée was actually already in the tent, getting ready for sleep. So I decided to go by myself and fish from the shore of the lake. This was around 10:30 p.m. Well, I was out there for a good 45 minutes with no odd interruptions and just enjoying the peace and quiet, when I hear a loud snap about 30 meters away. As a former infantryman, I've been taught to observe my surroundings and always be on my guard. This snap was odd. It wasn't like an ordinary twig snap, more like a large fallen branch. At first I'm thinking bear, as that would be the only logical explanation based on weight that could break something that large. So I'm looking in that general direction for a good 30 seconds after the snap and hear nothing. Then it happens. I hear footsteps, followed by the most foul and oddly unique smell hitting my nose. These steps are most certainly bipedal, and I just had the strongest intuition and gut feeling it wasn't anyone in my family, but something dangerous. like worse than what I faced overseas. Dangerous. The feeling of fear I felt was unrivaled at the moment. So I say out loud, "Who's there?" But there's all of a sudden silence for a good minute. Then it happens. I see something breaking the tree line about 15 feet from the shore of the lake. It's on 4 legs, which freaked me out because the walking after the snap was definitely a 2-legged creature, and an extremely pale with odd fur patches covering its body. It looked like a malnourished wolf or coyote, but with a smaller head. Like the head was half developed. We locked eyes, and again, it's like a telekinetic wave of fear washes over me, but I stood my ground. This thing then does what made me 100% sure it wasn't a normal animal. It talks. First, the most creepy laughter, almost like a child's mixed with a demon's, which is the best way I can describe it. And then it says to me, while simply walking away now, "Danger. You are in danger, all of you." Followed by more laughter. I stood frozen, watching it as it walked parallel to the lake until it was out of sight. I was then hit with an overwhelming feeling of dread and immediately thought to check on my fiancé and soon-to-be family members because the feeling inside me was so strong that they were now in extreme danger too. I got back to camp and everybody was asleep. I didn't tell any of them what happened as to not alarm them, and I didn't expect them to believe me. If I did, because I wouldn't believe myself if I hadn't seen and heard it. The worst part is, we have now been home for a full 24 hours, but that feeling of me and my fiancé being in danger keeps echoing in my mind. I was taught never to run or surrender, and to my face, my enemies head on. And this feeling I have is almost like a life or death thing. Kill it and be safe, or feel like me and my fiancé are going to die for God knows how long. I have training and have dealt with enemies before. Should I go back alone and prepared? What should I do? My fight or flight response hasn't been shut off since we've gotten home, and most of me wants to go back, prepared, and face this thing, or try and find something, which I doubt would be an issue, based on this weird feeling I have inside of me. Honestly, everyone, what should I do? Because I can't get this creature's words or thoughts, whatever it is projected out onto me, out of my head, much less the words I actually heard. A few years ago, I used to have to do a long drive from northern Illinois down to western Kentucky, about twice a month. I had gotten to the point where I knew the drive like the back of my hand. Sometimes it was actually a lot better to make the drive early evening and to do a bulk of the 9-hour drive through the night, getting me there about 1:30 a.m. to 2 a.m. No traffic, and in the summer, it was relaxing to drive with all the windows down. After crossing into Kentucky, there was about 2 hours of road without even highway lights. But, like I said, I'd done it so many times before. One of my last trips, I'd been heading down that stretch, and I had my brights on. In the distance on my driver's side of the shoulder, I could see what I thought was a deer. Got a little closer, and I realized it was a wolf. Now, I'm coming up on this, and it's on all fours, but its back had to be almost level with the roof of my sedan. I thought, holy cow, that thing's huge. Now, I'm doing probably 80 miles an hour, and I swear we lock eyes. I could feel him looking directly at me. I'm getting closer and closer. Now I can actually see his teeth. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was an actual animal. Then, as I'm probably 50 feet from this thing, about to pass it on the driver's side shoulder, it stood up on 2 legs, still staring directly into my eyes. I passed, and the rest of the drive I tried to figure out what I had seen, or should I loop back? I never told anyone that story, because most people would just say, "Oh, it was late, your mind was messing with you." But still, to this day, I won't forget how long that stare down was. I can't help but think I didn't catch him by surprise. More like he wanted to see me and help him. If he really wanted to stop me, he could have. This happened when I was really young. I was around 6 to 9 years old. A little backstory. I had a significant trauma happen to me when I was 6. I don't want to go into details, but it made life difficult for a while. I totally shut down for a bit, and sleep at the time was my only safe haven. For the next couple of years after my incident, my dreams got stranger and stranger. I at first only saw them in the background of my dreams, like part of the scenery almost. Then, I began to lucid dream. All of a sudden, these dark shadow people with red eyes began to manifest in my room. I never felt danger from them, and that gave me a sense of relief. I would talk to them like they were someone I knew, and I would tell them about my day. A lot of times, these conversations would end because they would hear something and move off my bed. I would wake from my semi-asleep state by trying to go after them. Towards the end of my encounters with these creatures, I got a sense of terror, and I could never pinpoint it until one night, a white figure came through my door and reached out with a knife toward me. I woke up with a jolt and never saw any of them again, though I will sometimes see one of them dart out of my vision. Up in Cave Creek, I was out cruising on some trails late at night in my 4x4 4Runner, kind of exploring the desert off of the Carefree Highway, when I spotted some deer with my light bar, so I followed them, which is the short version. I followed them into a canyon and lost sight of them, and as I was getting ready to leave, 3 of the deer bolted past me, coming towards me, and in the opposite direction they were heading. And, like a dumbass, I didn't think anything of it, and turned around and followed them, trying to get a picture. As I was trying to catch up to them, I glanced to my right. I have spotlights facing off both sides to light up the left and right of my truck. About 20 feet off the trail, there was a large figure, I'd say about 8 feet tall, sprinting next to me. It looked skinny and naked. Whatever it was looked to be out of human descent, and I didn't look too long because it freaked me out, and I slammed on the gas to get out of there. Debating on posting the longer version, and I could also link the location of the canyon if you'd like. My best guess, it was a skinwalker or something, but needless to say, I don't go there at night anymore. So, I rarely have nightmares, or ones that I can remember, but I notice that whatever I do, it always circles back to witches. Witches that turned into owls and watched me as I slept. Witches putting curses on family members in my old childhood home as I watched, trying to wake them up as their body broke and contorted. The disfigured witch muttering out words, never breaking eye contact with my relative as I tried to wake them up. The most recent one I had was a couple of days ago. I was driving along an expressway with my dog in the seat beside me. She had somehow opened the car door, so I had to exit the highway and pull over to the side of the road. I climbed in the back seat without getting off and shut it off. When I closed the door, I looked out the window and saw a van on the opposite side of the road, a little ahead of me. I remember being confused since it was out in the middle of nowhere. Tall grass, almost swampy ground as far as you can see. Then, I see a bloodied woman run out to the middle of the road. She may have looked towards my car. I can't remember. I sat in the back seat of my car as I saw something dark and huge rush out and tackle her to the pavement. Long claw-like nails ripped her open as it hunched over her. I was frozen in the back seat until my dog saw what I was seeing and started to loudly growl and bark at it. The noise must have attracted the creature because it stopped and looked at me. Every cell in my body froze. It stood up, and I got a better look at its body. Limbs so thin and long they dragged on the floor, hollowed out black slits for eyes, face obscured by dark matted hair or fur that swayed with each movement. It took a step forward, and I bolted to the front seat, jumping over the middle console and locking the doors before I swerved the car back and drove off, leaving the creature and torn apart woman in the middle of nowhere. It took a step forward, and I bolted to the front seat, jumping over the middle console and locking the doors before I swerved the car back and drove off, leaving the creature and torn apart woman in the middle of nowhere. I drove and drove and drove until I couldn't ignore my empty gas tank anymore. I pulled into a gas station and got off into the store. When I came back out, I froze as I saw someone looking at the back of my car. I immediately rushed over, nerves still frayed from the encounter with the creature. I angrily yelled at them to get away from my car. Did you see this?" They asked me, and I was confused, since I had no idea what they were talking about. Walking over, I saw something jammed under the back of my car. Kneeling down, I reached out and pulled it out. It was a bundle of twigs, wrapped in some sort of fabric with feather and carvings tied and etched into it. The person was still standing near me in my car and said, "Witches." And then I woke up, kind of in a panic and disoriented. I had been taking melatonin the last couple of days, so I know that they can make my dreams a lot more vivid, and I can remember a lot about them. Almost like I'm watching a movie in my sleep. So that's why there's more detail in this last nightmare. I don't really know why I keep on dreaming about disfigured witches, and I don't know if the creature in my dreams was a witch or a Wendigo/Skinwalker, because when I try and remember what it looked like, it resembles what I think they look like. I've always had a fear of witchcraft since I'm Hispanic, and that kind of just comes with it, at least in my family. But I've just noticed an increase of these nightmares in the last maybe 2 years, the family member being cursed, and this last one, the owl one, I've had forever. I know this last summer, I encountered something paranormal and out of this world, but I'm not exactly sure what it would be. My friend and his family are convinced it's a skinwalker, but I believe it was something else. I do know a little bit about skinwalkers and dogmen, and Bigfoot too, and I don't believe what I encountered was everything that matches up to what a skinwalker is. My friend's family thoroughly believes that this was the spirit or being that represents a skinwalker, and well, I believe it was a dogman, or potentially a dogman's spirit. Last July, I went and visited a close friend of mine who is native and lives on the Navajo reservation. We've been friends for years and met during a work retreat long ago. I thought I would make a vacation out of it by going to visit him. I stayed with him at his trailer for about a week or so, and then I went with him to go visit his family. His family is very enriched in Navajo culture and lore, and his mother especially can be very superstitious at times, but as of this event, I don't blame her for anything she believes or doesn't believe, or so I thought. My Navajo friend never really talked about skinwalkers or cryptids or anything that goes bump in the night. I guess I can't blame them, since it is a part of their culture not to talk about those things in fear of drawing them to you. I truly don't know how my friend felt about all that stuff because, well, he never really talked about it. When I met his family, which this was the first time, and they were very nice and lovingly invited me into their home to stay. His mom pulled me aside and warned me of her brother that had turned to the darker side of things and would sometimes appear around here at night just to start trouble. I didn't really understand what she meant by that, and at the time I thought she was just referring to him being a lowlife and a drunk and wanting to cause drama, so I left it at that. It's not like I haven't encountered my fair share of bums before. I never really asked my friend about his family or anything like that, so to my knowledge, my friend's uncle was nil. We stayed there for a few nights, and everything was as normal as you can get. On one of the nights, all of us were outside having a bonfire, talking, laughing, and eating good food, just like we had the nights before, when after a short time, my friend and his family began to get really quiet, and the laughing, good times and all, turns into a serious, stoic expressions. It was in that moment that I remember I could feel a shift in the mood and tonality around us. I don't know how else to describe it to you, but that's the best way I can. My friend and his family spoke together in Navajo in hushed tones, and I didn't understand a drop of that language, so I left trying to interpret the tone and demeanor as to what was being spoken about. After everybody got quiet, my friend started talking to his family, and they're very concerned. It was almost as if they were trying to conceal their voices from maybe not only me, but something else. At the time, I thought they were just trying to conceal their voice from me, but who knows? My friend turns around and walks up to me and says we need to go back inside the trailer right now. Confused, I thought we were having a good time, but he just keeps walking to the trailer and quickly keeps motioning for me to follow him, so I kind of just shrugged my shoulders, going along with whatever was happening. His dad was trying to put the fire out quickly, and Mom was rushing both me and my friend into the house. We got to the house, and the mother kept looking out the window, waiting for the father to run back up into the house. The father goes in and grabs the gun, and all the doors and windows become locked thoroughly. Now I'm starting to freak out just a little bit, because I wanted to know what's going on. Normally, you wouldn't have fires out here at nighttime, for fear that it may draw in terrible, terrible spirits. But I guess in this case, looking back, they had their whole property and family and house blessed, so they had weekly bonfires. Well, more like nightly, since they didn't have to worry about those kinds of things. Or so I thought. My friend comes up to me and whispers in my ear that his uncle is outside, and it's going to cause problems. I looked at him strangely and asked if he was drunk, and that we needed to call the police. That's when I heard its super loud bang on the trailer. The mom and father both shrieked, and the dad put his back up against the front door with a gun ready in his hands. At this point, I'm starting to freak the hell out, because I don't know what the hell is going on, but whatever it is feels ominous as hell. You could start to hear these heavy footsteps walking around the trailer outside, and heavy breathing. It didn't sound human. It had a There was so much gruff to the voice. Whatever it was, whoever it was pacing the trailer slowly, as if looking for a weak spot to try and break in. That's what it felt like to me, and I was becoming scared, terrified more likely. My friend and his family kept motioning me to be quiet and to listen, and this went on for probably a good 45 minutes, if I had to guess, but it is hard to say, because time feels like it's an eternity when you're in the moment. After a while, things got quiet for another little bit of time. Dad looked at us all and said we needed to leave the house now to be safe. With gun in hand, he motions for all of us to run outside and jump in their old van and flee. Me, still not knowing exactly what is going on, I'm kind of left with no choice but to tag along and to go with the flow, so scaredy cat me runs out with them and hops in the van. As his dad is basically throwing us in the back of the van, I heard the most horrifying screech or roar that I've ever heard from behind the trailer, just off a little ways in the darkness. It sounded like a mix of a bear, crossed with a wolf, crossed with a dying woman being murdered. It sounded like it came from the pits of hell. I think that was the point in the night where I really felt true fear go down my spine. I felt like I was in danger. My friend and his mother were pale, and the mother was starting to cry, praying in Navajo. His dad is swearing in Navajo, and he's trying to get the van to start. I think it was an old beater van that had problems with the ignition, and it had issues starting up sometimes, if I remember correctly. I think I do remember at one point, though, my friend mentioned that they needed to have the whole engine replaced, but didn't have the money. Anyway, he gets the van going, and we're flying out of there onto the main highway. Now at this point, remember, it's nighttime. There ain't no lights around, except the stars outside. He's doing probably close to 70, maybe 80 miles an hour, and he's flooring it, trying to get away from where we just were. And we're all quiet in the back. Nobody's saying a word. When my friend looks up and looks out the window of the back of the van, he starts screaming and pointing and shouting something in Navajo. I look, and catching up with the van is the largest wolf I've ever seen in my life. I guess I could call it that because it resembled a wolf, but it looked so much more evil. It's like a wolf that came from hell, and it had kind of a smoky vapor to it. if that makes any sense. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's almost like it had black smoke emanating from it, and it had glowing red eyes and large teeth, like some sort of saber-toothed wolf or something, and it was massive. It was running on all fours and getting closer and closer to the van. We're all watching in horror, and then this thing just darts off to the right of the van and increases its speed to not only keep up with the van, but keep up on the driver's side window. And at this point, it's right next to the dad, and he's keeping up at about 80 miles an hour. We're all screaming. His dad pulls off of a fork in the road that was conveniently, thank you Lord, just a little bit ways off of where we were in that moment. The road is a little bit more rough, but he decided to go down that way to try and ward off the thing or whatever was chasing us. While he starts going down this road, the next thing is that this thing just disappears. It's a more primitive road, but by primitive, I mean it still has concrete and stuff, just hasn't been taken care of. So there's potholes and parts of the road that are severely cracked and damaged. We go down this road for I don't even know how long, maybe an hour, but that might be a bit of a stretch. At one point, he just pulled over and parks the van in the middle of nowhere in the pitch black of night. He sits there and just starts sobbing against the wheel. A grown native man sobbing. My friend and his mother didn't say a word, and I'm not even sure what was going on. I'm trying to process what just happened, and there was some freakish demon wolf thing chasing the van the size of a car. I kind of blacked out, to be honest. I felt like it was so traumatic, my brain just had to escape and register that I really wasn't in reality anymore. My memory is kind of fuzzy, but I can tell you that we did end up sleeping in that van. It wasn't comfortable, I can tell you that, but I think we were just all so exhausted from sheer fear. I have no idea why it stopped following us and why his dad just pulled over to the side of the road, leaving us all vulnerable, but whatever it was, we didn't see it after we pulled off. I remember opening my eyes and it being daylight, or at least just starting to see the sunlight come out, with his dad outside of the van looking around. My friend and his mom were still asleep, and the dad just hops back in the van, turns the van on, and begins to turn back around to where their home was. I was exhausted and still terrified, but I didn't have the energy to ask what had just happened. Somewhere along the way home, my friend and his mother had woken up from their slumber, and we all just kind of sat there in silence, in trauma from the night before. At one point or another, we pulled back into their house and were all getting out of their van when the dad and mom walk up to the house and start talking nervously again in Navajo and praying, dropping to their knees. There were deep scratches all over the house and door. It looked like several Kodiak bears tried to maul their trailer. It was bad. My friend is trying to calmly talk to his parents as best as he can, and they're both so worked up they can't even think straight. My friend comes to me and pulls me aside and tells me we should leave, that it's not safe to be here anymore. I wasn't going to argue or try to ask questions. I just went along with everything, and gladly so. In the last 12 hours, I felt my life had flipped upside down entirely. We left, and the rest of the visit wasn't the same at all. My friend had completely shut down and didn't really speak much. Fast forward a little bit, and I was able to finally talk to him and what had happened that night. This is where things get a little creepy, and I really started connecting the dots. Turns out my friend's uncle at a young age murdered his little brother, or in this case, my friend's mother's youngest brother, whom at the time was a small child. This in turn caused him to be banished, and he took and turned to dark magic, becoming a skinwalker. They had a name for it that they called it, but I can't remember it. Basically, a skinwalker. Her brother became animalistic in nature, living in the wild and turning to evil. He had tried to come back, time to time, to torment his sister and my friend's family, taking the shape of hideous beings and animals. This is why they believed him to truly be a skinwalker. However, it gets more terrifying than this. That night in July, when we experienced what we did, it was later found out that her brother, whom had turned to evil practices, committed suicide in a satanic ritual of sorts that same evening. This led to further speculation that this was the actual evil spirit whom dwelled in his mom's brother, had come to enact revenge on the family for banishing years before. That's what he and their family believes now. Why it stopped following us in the van after some time is also another interesting story. I guess it just so happens that not too much further down the road, where his dad had pulled off, lived a medicine man in the community whom had much of the area blessed and had warded off dark spirits before in the past. This friend of mine, whom I won't name for respect of him and his family, claimed dark spirits were afraid of him. All the pieces started to connect more and more as time went on. Myself, I'm not really sure what to think or believe. I know their entire culture is very enriched in that sort of thing, and warding off bad spirits, but this was on a whole other level. I didn't think spirits or demons, call them whatever you will, could take physical form like what I saw, and chase down a van at 80 miles an hour. I do watch creepypasta stuff, and things on Dogman, Bigfoot, etc., so to see this in real life was more than terrifying. It was as if I was in a horror movie. It sure as hell resembled a Dogman of sorts from what I could see out of the back of the van, but by resembling, I mean it just looked huge, hulking, like a hulking satanic saber wolf thing. I don't have an answer for you, but it caused me to shut down for weeks until I could finally talk about it with my friend and get some closure on what exactly happened and why. Maybe it was the spirit that dwelled in his uncle that came and attacked us. I have no idea. My friend and his family had prayed heavily for me in Navajo since I was there with them, as this happened so as to not attract any more of these things. They firmly believe that once you have a sighting with one of these, you become marked for more encounters. His parents had had their house blessed multiple times before this happened, in fear that her brother would return and seek revenge on her, as he had tried before. My friend had told me that this was the reason why this spirit or being wasn't able to enter their house, because it had been blessed by that medicine man. I know that skinwalkers and dark spirits are very much a part of Navajo and are very real. I couldn't imagine what it would be like dealing with these things on a normal basis. This almost makes me question what the definitive line is that really separates cryptids from spiritual beings. Are dogmen spiritual beings at all? Or are they just demons masquerading in physical form? After sitting on all of this for quite some time now, I've come to the possible conclusion that maybe dogmen are just spirits taking physical form and going after people, which is kind of what they do anyway. I could keep going on, but I'll end this and say that no, I don't believe this was a skinwalker. I believe it was a dogman in some way, shape, or form, regardless if it was a spiritual or flesh and blood being. I think there is more to generality in cryptids being spiritual beings more than we would like to think of, with all the ties to opening up portals to other dimensions and seeming to always not be around when we're looking for them. If you want to count the lack of blood trails from when they are shot, well, that's a whole other ballpark to get into. Besides, whatever chases a van down for as long as it did possessed supernatural power in its own right, and I know that no flesh and blood being alone, or at least just an animal, could have done that. I was on the Little Miami bike trail heading back to Murrow from Oregonia, mile marker 23.5. It was Sunday, April 12th, around 5 in the afternoon. Since the COVID restrictions were enacted a week or two prior, the trail had become so crowded every day of the week. However, a cold front came in, and it was cool, cloudy day, and very few people on the trail. Maybe 15 to 20 riders encountered from Oregonia to Kings Mill. Well, maybe more, but not bad. I'm retired and ride this route nearly daily, weather permitting. So, after passing under the former Jeremiah Morrow Bridge, I-71, over Little Miami River, there's a long, gentle arc in the trail. I haven't seen a soul since I turned around at Wilmington Road. I'm cruising. It's nice and quiet, when suddenly I heard a loud knock. So distinct that I instantly said in my head, that was a knock. It came from atop the hill to the east. I pondered all of the conditions, kids playing, not, cold, remote, and they don't play in woods anymore. Adults messing around, maybe? But how would they know I was there? Natural, very doubtful. I'm nearly 68, and never heard anything so crisp, clearly, like a Louisville slugger full speed against a barkless, solid ash tree, or so I imagined. That's what happened. I look online to see if any Bigfoot sightings had been reported in this area, and found none. I stored the incident away until last weekend when I was talking to my son. He's 46 in May, and I raised him near Murrow, abutting the former Frisch Farms in the 3C Highway. Our school district includes the Mainville area, and one of his good friends lived on a hillside at a 90-degree curve on Sickby Road. His friend, Chris Flick's older brother, told Nick 20 years ago he and his dad both saw a Bigfoot walking through the woods on the opposing hillside 2 different times. Nick said he never related this until he told me, because of my knock story, of course. He said he'll never forget it, and because of his story, I tell you my story. I just seen a question on here asking about a positive encounter, and I have one I would like to share. Though may not be what I thought. About 20 years ago, after I graduated high school, I used to run traps to make extra money in the wintertime. Since I was pregnant with my daughter, any sort of extra income was necessary, since trapping is frowned upon, oddly. Anyway, my father had always told me about the creek I trapped in as being quite strange. We would always walk the creek to collect arrowheads and look for other Shawnee relics. So he would tell me stories about the Shawnee Native American tribe and their history and folklore. It was a very special spot to us, so when I began trapping, my father would tell me to have respect for the wildlife. Don't litter, kill humanely, and don't kill what doesn't need to be killed. So, I built a great deal of appreciation to life, which led to my career in conservation. The only reason I state these things is to build context as to why I did what I did. About once a week, while walking up the creek, I would hear whistling, like a human but in random patterns, and that would be along with the smell of sulfuric and rotten eggs, which my dad told me was most likely a Bigfoot or a skunk ape, and sightings had occurred as long as he could remember in our area. Then, one time I was scanning down the tree line with my binoculars to check to see if I had any coyotes and foxes in my traps to save me the walking time. I seen a fairly medium-sized tree swing dramatically a little past the tree line. So I headed over there with my .22, hoping to sneak up on a bobcat or any animal that was medium-sized my .22 could kill with a headshot. About 3/4 of the way to the tree line, the swaying had stopped, and I didn't see anything, but at least 2 of whatever it was began whistling and whooping further back in the forest. I continued to head up the creek, and it always stayed somewhat behind me at a distance, but never left. That was pretty interesting. Then, one day, sadly an oil fracking company purchased most of the land. They still gave me permission to trap, but they had a few accidents where the water got so damn nasty, it killed just about everything. It broke my heart to see beavers, muskrats, and some coons floating down the creek every time I went. But after they had installed their rigs and cleared some forest things, got a little hostile. One day, running traps, almost all my traps had been ruined, bent, beaten, and broken. And the remained animals I had caught were either stolen, ripped from the trap with their foot or leg still attached, and I even found a coyote that had been messed up bad. Fur torn, broken lower jaw, head beaten in. I felt like this was in retaliation to what the oil company had done, and I was being blamed. But it is positive. For a few months afterwards, I would go to the store twice a week and buy a variety of apples, pears, and a mixture of meat from carcasses I had skinned, put it in a basket, and leave it in the forest, hoping whatever it was would get it before anything else. Sometimes the basket would disappear, but always in 2 days, everything was gone. One day, I believe it left me a present in return. Next to where I dropped off the basket, There was about 100 plus small sticks stacked very neatly, about 20 acorns, and a deer antler. It made me feel happy. I do hope that I did help this creature out in its very sad moments of life, though it may have been everything but a Bigfoot or skunk ape, because I never physically seen it or any tracks in the creek bed. But all of my occurrences happened in the woods along the creek, so I really don't know. So still to this day, 20 years later, I think of it time to time, and I don't see a reason why people should be afraid of them. It was a sad but positive 2 winter seasons with it. Even if it was an animal I didn't recognize. I hope I helped. My brother and I have a story that happened during the day, and we're both positive what we saw was a skinwalker. Here's what happened. We were staying in Wenatchee in Washington State. It's kind of eastern, but not really. Like, it wants to be eastern, but it's not. Anyhow, we were staying with my friend's family whilst my parents were out of state. My friend's mom, I'll call her Tammy, says to me, "We would get your brother. Dinner's ready." To which I replied, "Where is he?" My friend, I'll call her Emily, goes, "I think he's by the river." So I said, okay, and went to go get him. I crossed the backyard, which is really a field, and prepared myself to go down a stupidly steep hill. The only way to get down the hill was to keep your foot planted on some rocks. It's either that or you fly down. I got down the hill, and say my brother just chilling on a swing thing. You know, the swings with 2 or 3 seats on them? Those things. I stood behind for a minute, planning to push the swing a little and scare him. But I heard my name being called. So, naturally, I turned around, thinking it was Emily calling me or something. No one on the field. I had and still have a pretty active imagination, so I just brushed it off. I turned back to the swing, and my brother was standing up now. His eyes were fixed across the river, so I looked over too. We saw a deer-looking thing standing on its back legs, and I again was just like, oh, it's my imagination again. I looked away for a few seconds, then turned back. My brother was now shaking. He still hadn't even noticed me. The deer guy was still there, but its mouth was moving. It was saying my name. I just could barely make it out, but it was saying my name. It started to shake as well. My brother turned around, ready to run back to the house, and yelled when he saw me. This was the following conversation between us. "What happened? Did you see it too? The deer? It wasn't a deer. I don't know what that thing was, but it was not a deer. Was it calling my name to you? No, it was calling my name. We can talk about it later, but I was sent to go get you 5 minutes ago. Dinner's ready." And I know I said I have a very active imagination, but the part that scares me is that my brother does not, and he saw exactly what I saw. And so we went inside and ate dinner, and said nothing of it. We had both relaxed for the most part by this time we got back to the house, and we texted each other about it after, so nobody would know but us. About a year after the happening, my brother came into my room and said, "Hey, remember that deer thing we saw in Wenatchee a few years ago?" I told him I thought about it frequently, and what he said actually scared me so bad I thought I was going to go into cardiac arrest. He goes, "Well, I've done some major research, and we could have died if we went near it. Turns out it was a skinwalker." And he continued to tell me about skinwalkers and what they do. I'm not getting into it, but every now and again, we both share a look when someone starts talking about stuff like wendigos and skinwalkers, urban legends and creepypasta, stuff like that, and neither of us had said anything about it. But my brother decided to tell my dad, who grew up with urban legends and stuff like that, and he also thinks it's a skinwalker. I can still see that evil thing's face every time I hear about Wendigo and Skinwalker encounters. My brother got a kind of mental effect from this thing. Effect, I don't even know what to call it. I don't want to say it's like PTSD, but certain things around the topic will trigger him. He'll constantly have nightmares about it, and he doesn't like talking about it, unless he initiates the conversation. I'm a little more thick-skinned around the topic of scary things, but it scared me into thinking I was going to die on the spot. We haven't been back to Wenatchee. Well, after my Nymphs Fairy story, a lot of people have asked me to give more, so there's a lot of you who won't believe me, but my village is a freaking supernatural place with weird things happening over the years, and there was even a UFO crash. You can all search it on Google. My village is Atalanti, Atalanti, named after the Greek Amazon, and it was all over the news back in 1990 when the weird object landed. But let's get started. My first story. While my great-grandfather, from my grandfather's side, was young, he was working for someone who had sheep, and one night, one of the sheeps went nuts. So during the night while they were asleep, they heard some noises, and they woke up to find the sheep having a saddle on and walking. They tried to stop it, but it was like it didn't listen. None of the sheeps ever did this before. So when the sheep turned around, it didn't really look like a sheep anymore, but something else. Like the voice was deeper, and it was like it had walked on two legs. The face was like distorted, and it was definitely not white anymore. My great-grandfather was so scared after he run and never worked with this guy again. Story number 2. There are a lot of rumors about people using dark magic and evil things, and a guy my grandfather knew didn't believe these things were real. He kept walking around telling this to the locals at the cafes, and a weird old dude had heard him, and he was like, "You'll see tonight." So he sent a weird freaking donkey to him that kept kicking him at night until he begged to stop and said he believed in demonic entities. Story number 3. Now this is a neighbor of my grandfather while they were in their 20s. He was a man who went to church very often, always praying, always believing in God, and it was like the devil tricked him every day. There was a boy who kept calling him at nights at the stairwell of his house. He asked him to go outside and play, and after a while, when he didn't join him, the boy turned into a black dog. That happened for a long time until they called a priest, and it stopped. Story number 4. This happened to one of my uncles. He came back from work late at night. They were working as farmers with clover. Anyway, there used to be a small and narrow street that led to the house faster, but no one went there during late night. It was a crossroad, and there was a small faucet there too, but everyone avoided it after midnight. Well, my uncle decided to head faster home, rather than to stay safe, and something invisible attacked him. It grabbed him by the neck and pushed him down. He immediately started saying a prayer, the Lord's Prayer, and the thing left. Possibly a demon. A priest had later told him to never use that street. And guess what? The street doesn't exist anymore. There's a deserted house there now, and I don't want to know what's hiding in there. Story number 5. My aunt used to hear every night a weird banging outside of their window when they moved in their new home, like someone was chopping wood. They often went out to see if there was someone, but no one was there, and apparently they learned that they have killed soldiers at the place during World War II. Crazy. Story number 3. The alien UFO crash. So, during 1990 in the summer, there were a lot of UFO sightings all around Greece, and one actually crashed at a hill next to my village. Story number 7. My cousin said at their clover field once that something had landed again, because there was a circle and it was like burned, and for literally about 2 years nothing grew on that place again. Story number 8. When we went with my grandfather to buy cheese from a guy he knows, we walked into his farm. I looked around the walls and it was full of lashes, like the whips that hit the horses with, but some of them were a bit too much. They seemed super heavy, and I asked my grandfather, "What's that?" I was like 9 to 10, but I have never seen that type of lash before. It didn't look normal. Anyway, my grandfather told me to shush, and he said we'll talk home. So, when we went home, he told me that man calls demons and hits them. He asked them who they hurt, and then hits them so hard with those whips. So, I was like, oh, he's nice then. And my grandfather said immediately, he hasn't been in church for many, many years, because what he's doing is against God. Even though he hits them, he still uses dark magic to call them in. Well, guys, these are just my stories, and I have a lot more, about ghosts and saints appearing at churches, and so many kids I know have their own stories from their grandparents. I swear, my village, and especially central Greece, there's something there. Some people even claim to have seen satyrs at the ancient place of Delphi, that they're weird electromagnetic powers, and don't get me started about Mount Olympus. Anyway, hope you enjoy these. This story was told to me by my auntie. She is from Del Morto, the northern rim of Canyon di Chelly. Job security and job availability is scarce and almost non-existent on the Navajo Nation. There were no jobs in the nearby communities or towns. Like many residents of the Navajo Nation, she had to find work off the res in border towns. She had been hired by the power plant in Page, Arizona. Depending on the night shift or day shift, she would have to leave home at odd hours to make it to work on time. She explained that she would drive to Page by way of going to a similar town, then to another town, followed by yet another town, and then finally Page. One time, she had to leave very early in the morning hours, shortly after midnight. She figured that she would just make it to Page and sleep in her vehicle until her shift had started. She was the owner of one of those late 1980s, early 90s Astro vans, the ones with the huge bump it type of things on top. It was the definition of a res ride. No air conditioning, busted up, and if you drove faster than 60 miles an hour, it would start shaking. She said somewhere on the desolate stretch of desert road, between a few of the towns, she started to feel uneasy. The uneasiness wasn't a slow creeping feeling. It was a sudden surge of anguish. She quickly searched the rearview mirrors and scanned the horizon for other vehicles or streetlights from NHA housings that speckled the landscape in certain areas, searching for some type of familiarity to soothe her uneasiness. No luck. She tried turning the knob on the AM/FM radio in search of any form of radio stations. Still no luck. As her focus darted onto the roadway from fidgeting with the radio, something caught the corner of her gaze. The headlights illuminated the figure on the shoulder of the pavement. As she drove past the area, she said it smelt like roadkill. Very pungent. She described it as a mountain lion with an unusual silhouette. As she drove past the figure, she realized in the passenger side rearview mirror that whatever it was gave way to pursuit. The black mass with the silhouette of an odd mountain lion was running alongside the van. She gripped the wheel firmly with sweaty palms and floored the gas pedal. As the van began to accelerate, the wheels started to vibrate turbulently. She watched as the figure fell back and cut across the backside of the van and was stalking the driver's side. She began to pray in Navajo. The speedometer indicated that she was reaching 60 miles an hour, a detail she already had come to the conclusion due to the turbulence of the vehicle. The Skinwalker began to pick up speed and start to overtake the vehicle. She didn't want whatever it was to make it in front of the vehicle. Her explanation was that she didn't want to see what it was in full beams of the headlights. She figured she would faint or drive off the road if she saw the details of the Skinwalker. So as a gut reaction, due to the fear, she veered to the left. She hears a huge thud, and the steering wheel jerks out of her hands momentarily. But she safely regains control of the wheel. The loud thump and scraping can be heard along the entire undercarriage of the van. Her logical thought process kicks in. She is not sure what she hit, but her instincts tell her to slow down and assess the damage made to the van, to check if she can safely make it to Page without incident or leaking fluid. She turns on her hazard lights and parks in the middle of the road. With a bright LED storm light type flashlight, she hesitantly exits the cab of the vehicle. She checks the tires, the grill, underneath the grill, not exactly sure what she was looking for. The smell of roadkill is still very pungent and present. She checks the rear of the vehicle. She is covering her mouth and nose with her sleeve because the smell was so bad. Curiosity gets the best of her, and she points the flashlight down the roadway. Before the light of the flashlight illuminates whatever she hit, she hears a woman screaming for help. It sounded like an old lady. She said in the middle of the road there was a bloodied mountain lion pelt and a wrinkled, bloody lady. From what she could see, she said the old lady was naked but covered in blood. She said she hauled ass back to the van, still hearing the shrieks of the skinwalker. She said that she yelled back in Navajo something to the translation of, "That's why you should have just left me alone. You did this to yourself." She makes it to Page with no further incidents as the sun is rising. This was back in the early 2000s when I would go and visit my uncle and grandfather, and my uncle would take me on rides on his motorcycle out in the back country. They lived out in Minnesota and had miles upon miles of beautiful backcountry roads that were sparsely traveled. It made great for riding around on a motorcycle. I have so many fond memories with me and my uncle, going riding for 30 minutes to an hour in the evening, just enjoying the wind blowing against your face. There were several times that we had a few bull elks here and there. That was pretty cool to see. I saw more deer more times than I can count, but I kind of figured that's usual for being out and about in the countryside. However, that was all ruined for me one night when my uncle decided to take me on a night motorcycle ride. He had never taken me during the nighttime, so I was ecstatic for the adventure. Plus, he told me he was going to take me on a different route than he normally takes. This excited me even more so. Oh, I should probably mention that I was only about 9 years old at the time, so I was still very young and very impressionable. We get on his bike and we're going off. He starts to take us down some roads that I wasn't too familiar with, and they trailed off and forked off of our usual routes that we would sometimes take. I was having the time of my life, even though there were hardly if any streetlights around, because hey, we're on the backcountry, and it was darker than dark. But I felt safe with my uncle. It's hard to say how long we were riding for before it happened, but at some point down one of the roads, my uncle and I turned our attention to this loud crashing sound to the right of the road just as we were passing it. It sounded like one of those Tomcat construction workery machineries that people drive around. It was so loud, and I remember thinking, is construction going on right now, this late at night? Just as we were passing, and I promise you on this, and I don't want you to think I'm crazy, the trees open up, and this large demon thing bolts out on all fours, begins sprinting after us on our motorcycle. I am screaming bloody murder, and my uncle kicks it into high gear, and we go soaring down the road. Of course, I was behind him, so I really had no idea how fast we were going, but if I had to guess, maybe 80 or 90 miles an hour. Whatever was chasing us was keeping up with us and was slowly inching closer and closer. I don't know what the hell it was, but the closest comparison I can make is if you've ever seen the Van Helsing movie. I think it came out in 2003. At the very end, he fights off Dracula and turns into this massive, monstrous wolf-looking creature. What I saw looked very similar in size and stature. The face was very similar to a giant snout full of crocodilian-like teeth. It had a sort of dog glow in the eyes, kind of like a red-orange color. It looked to me like somebody crossed a crocodile and a wolf with a splash of human and demon. This thing was hulking in size and dwarfed not only me, but my uncle and the bike. If I had to guess, I would say it was around 7 feet tall on all fours, with the head as big as my uncle, or so it seemed. It chased us for a minute, and then got extremely close to the bike, like it was going to reach out and grab us, but then it just jumped right off into the woods and vanished, just like that. I was still screaming and hysterical until we got back to his house. What happened that night was one of the most traumatic things to have happened in my life. I had to undergo therapy for a while, and it really messed me up seeing something like that. I think my uncle even gave up on his motorcycle license for a while, but I didn't really talk to him about it or knew how he felt. After that, I didn't ride with him on his bike anymore, and I kind of shut down for a while. I stopped going over there, and a few years later, I would come to find out that my uncle had a massive heart attack. It's a shame because I was close with him at the time. I guess I should have found out how he's come to terms with everything, but I'll never know now. I just wish I knew what it was. I don't think it was any known animal that I've ever seen or heard of. And when I say hulking and demonic looking, I mean it. This thing came straight out of hell, and you could just feel the evil emanating off of it. I have never felt such fear in my life. I also think that part was due to the fact that I believe it was toying with us. This thing was so massive, it could have caught up to us and ripped us both off the bike and eaten us right there. As it kept up with us and acted like it wasn't even breaking a sweat or trying to keep close. It's almost as if it just wanted to let us know that it could get us anytime it wanted, and we were helpless. I can't shake those feelings. I don't know what you want to call it, whatever it is I encountered that night, but I will tell you it was evil, and I don't wish that for anybody, ever. I was driving down Willard Road around 5 p.m. as I came around the last right-hand corner, looking toward the straightaway to the junction with Cook Underwood Road. I saw a black object in the road. I thought it was a bear, and the largest bear I have ever seen. It took up the whole left lane of the road, and it was huge. It looked like the butt was raised up. I figured it could be a 600-pound bear in my mind. Then I saw this commotion going on, like something moving up and down, all black. A bear will run or lumber across the road. At the time, I thought I have never seen a bear do this. I thought this could be several deer or elk walking in the road. I was confused about all the motion going on. Then, as it approached, the creature approached the edge of the bank. It popped up. I yelled out, "It's a man!" What is a man doing out here in the woods this time of night? It stepped onto the bank and walked into the woods. As my mind was trying to figure out what I saw the whole body and the head. The right leg stepped onto the bank, left arm back, no hat, no coat, no clothes. There was no snout or ears like a bear. Yes, a cone-like head, tall, arms longer, legs bulky. My headlights lit it up. By the time I passed it, it had disappeared into the woods, and by the time I reached Cook Underwood Road, about 600 feet, I knew what I saw, but was still just trying to process it. I went back on Sunday to see if I could see prints, but it had rained hard all night, and I saw no prints. I still see the creature in my mind. Later, as my mind was processing what I saw, I knew it had to be arms and legs going up and down as it crossed the road, and also it was actually crawling, then stood up by the bank, but it was so fast like it popped up. Still hard for me to believe what I saw, but I believe it was a Sasquatch. I also now believe as I approached it, when my headlights came upon it, it turned back towards the headlights and scrunched its face because the headlights were in its eyes, then turned and faced into the woods and walked off. 37 years ago, My mother and I saw an entity outside looking in at us through the window. It was hairless, pale, white, huge bulging black eyes, and it had teeth that were very small, very well spaced, skinny and pointed, almost kind of like an anglerfish. We hid for hours until we heard my father drive towards the house. We both looked out the window to see the being stand up from behind a wall. It was much taller than a human, and it was hiding behind the wall, and I believe waiting for us to come outside. My father drove up the driveway, and we saw the silhouette of its body from the back. It was hunched over, staring at the car. My father saw it in the headlights and what it looked like perfectly. He drove at it, and it ran away into the brush around the house. It never made a sound, and it seemed smart but cautious, and the overwhelming feeling I got that night that it was vicious and violent. My parents spoke with police as we were so horrified about the encounter. After speaking to police, or KGB, we were relocated and forced to never speak of the event to anyone. Within 30 hours, I was living in a new home, nearly 100 kilometers away. I have searched for so many years for an explanation. I've spoken with government officials, and I have interviewed with people who lived near our home, and then about 10 years ago. I have no answers. If people might speak with me, my messages of your comments would be constructive. I would appreciate some open-minded conversation. So, I've been a big follower of your channel for some time now, and have never had any cryptid encounters myself, or anything strange. As you know, everything has been shut down with the quarantine lately. That is, until just a few days ago when they opened up hunting. Well, everything else is still pretty shut down, but that's my one solace, and just in time for turkey season. Where I live, there's actually a few groups of turkeys traversing around the area. In fact, this area is so popular for turkey hunting that it's not uncommon that every year I have people that pull up to my property asking me if they can hunt. With the season opening back up, I've been really wanting to get me a big tom for some time now, and was worried that the season would never open back up. The only issue that I have is that I haven't seen the groups of turkeys that I saw last year. What's even more disturbing is the other day when I was walking around, I found several dead turkeys that weren't whole, if you know what I mean. I'm talking turkeys being ripped into pieces. Not all of them, and surprisingly, some of the girls or female turkeys that I have found with their heads completely torn off. Yesterday, about half a mile away from my house, I found a big tom that would have been perfect, but his insides had been ripped out entirely, and his neck was broken in half. It was a mess, but there was no blood. That's the weird thing. And I noticed also very large canine tracks. I know for a fact we don't have wolves, only coyotes at most. Well, mountain lions, of course. The neighbors around here don't have any dogs that I'm aware of, and I've been here for years now, so I believed I would have seen them. Plus, I live on private property, and I've never seen a dog here before. I could take a picture of the tracks because they are rather large, and I'm not saying it's a dogman, but it's really similar how everything I hear from your channel matches up with everything that I'm experiencing and seeing in person. Mutilated cadavers and large canine prints. It's just a red flag for me. I have not heard a single gobble gobble, or any sort of sign that there are live turkeys around my area, which, again, deeply disturbs me. Every May is usually full of turkeys, and there are plenty to go around, but not this year. Something has been killing them off, and there are no natural predators that I know of that would just mutilate a turkey with good meat on it and leave it. Think about it. A mountain lion wouldn't just leave a cadaver like that. And a pack of coyotes, well, the cadaver would disappear. Even wolves. No predator that I know of is this messy and kills for the sake of killing. Again, I'm not saying this is definitively a dogman, but I just find it really creepy now that there's such a striking similarity between what I hear and what I'm actually seeing with my own eyes. I should reiterate that the canine tracks are enormous. I haven't measured exactly, but my whole hand can fit inside the print. There didn't look like there had been much of a struggle on the turkey's end. and like I said, no blood either, which is so strange. I have not heard anything at night or during the day that would lead me to believe that I have a dogman problem. I have not heard any silence in the woods, nor have I felt anything weird, nor have I seen any weird shadows darting around the woods. I'll just have to keep my eyes and ears open and attentive to my area and let you know. Maybe other people have caught on by this point of the year, and so I've already had at least 3 to 4 people pull up and ask me if it's okay. This year so far, I've had 0. The quarantine might have something to do with all this, but I'm not 100% sure. I'll just have to keep you updated. About 7 years ago, I saw 3 apparitions appear and evaporate before my eyes. I was sitting in my car around 2 to 3 in the morning, waiting for my friend to come out of their house. Something caught my attention in my peripheral, crossing the street in front of my car. There was no one out due to the time. I didn't have my headlights on, just some ambient lights from my car stereo. I saw a man walk in front of my car, made up of what I can only describe as white smoke. It was almost like a body made of fog with an image projected onto it. He glided smoothly across the street, but I can make out the details of boots. I could not see his face. It was hard to make out any details of him, though he was so close to me. He never looked in my direction, just straight ahead. As I was watching him, completely confused to what I was seeing, I saw 2 more apparitions also crossing the street. They were at least 2 to 3 houses away. The male figure was directly in front of my car. I would say he was only 3 to 4 feet away from me. Your mind can't really make sense of what you're seeing. You don't really feel fear, it was more complete bafflement. As he got to the middle of the street, he literally started to disappear in front of my eyes. From his head down, like steam evaporating. He was merely a torso with legs by the time he reached the middle of the street. I was completely frozen, confused. I have had strange experiences, heard plenty of creepy noises, strange presences felt over the years, but I had never seen an apparition of any kind before. As I was watching him slowly evaporate, he walked directly into a parked truck on the opposite side of the street and disappeared completely. At that very moment, when my mind was completely upside down with trying to make sense of what I just saw, the music in my car went completely silent. The whole stereo just shut off. That is when I actually got scared. It immediately got my attention off of what I just saw. I was frantically hitting the power button, off and on. Still, no sound. I had been listening to a CD at the time and can tell you exactly what song was playing when it all happened. I ejected the CD, put it back in, changed tracks. Still, no sound. As I was hitting every button on my stereo, I finally went for the volume knob. It had been turned completely to the left, muting the stereo. It was an analog control, so it had to be physically turned all the way to the left. That was when I went from confused to terrified. Whatever I had just experienced, witnessed with my own 2 eyes, had just become a full-on poltergeist and turned off my stereo. Was it trying to distract me? To draw my attention away from something I wasn't meant to see? Was it trying to cement the experience so I couldn't try to explain it away later? Our minds desperately try to make sense of things that don't really fit into our realities. With everything I saw and experienced that night, there is no rational explanation for any of it. That experience still completely haunts me, but I have 0 doubt in my mind that apparitions, whatever they are real, and also have an intelligence, an intent. There's no way you can truly convey an experience like that to another person. You can only truly believe in the supernatural when it presents itself directly to you. Over the years, I have analyzed every detail of what I had experienced. Did I see ghosts? Did I witness a strange glitch in time? A portal, perhaps? I even analyzed what song I was listening to at the time. It was actually a cover song by Atlas Sound of Joe Meek. Meek was a pioneer in experimental music in the 1960s, and I had been a fan of his music for quite a while at that point. It wasn't until this experience that I decided to read more about Joe Meek and his life. It turns out in 1967, he murdered his landlady and then shot himself with a shotgun. I had no clue about any of that tragedy or anything about Joe Meek's personal life with the exception of his music and his influence on experimental production. When I read about the murder/suicide, I cannot help but feel that the apparitions were connected to the music I was playing and to those deaths. Though the tragedy took place in England and my experience was in LA, I would love to hear if any of your thoughts about this or similar experiences. Hi everyone, I would like to share this story. I've heard about two men who supposedly lived in the Develi's cave in Penteli, Athens, Greece. Some people from the area have said they've encountered them close to the forest and the cave. Well, I need to tell you that there's a lot of theories about this cave, about other dimensions, and the fact that you can actually travel somewhere else through here. Even UFO sightings, people losing their memory. There's the phenomenon of negative gravity, which is amazing. There's so much electromagnetic activity. So people who claim seeing them said the men always walk with their hands behind their back, and whoever saw them thought they didn't have hands. But if you took a look from the back, you could see their hands were bird-like, like claws. They never spoke, almost like they couldn't, and they were very tall and pale. Now, could this really be just a spooky story? But if it's not, what do you think they could be? Could they really be from a different dimension? Or they're entities? Or just people who were born like this? There's also sightings of angels and ghosts on the area, so maybe it's all illusions from the huge electromagnetic energy field. Also, another fact about the cave is that the compasses go crazy there, and during 1977, they said the army actually did some experiments there, and after the 1990s Satanists actually went there for, their satanic rituals. Okay, some more tales from my haunted childhood. As a young teen, I just refused to sleep at normal hours, especially on weekends. Why? Well, that's because the house I lived in and the land the house was on was haunted as shit. Staying up usually meant seeing some freaky stuff, and growing up in a small English town, well, that's as exciting as life got. So, one night when I was around 14, I was staying up, staring at my window, when I started seeing glowing blue and purple lights coming from the forest behind my house. We don't have fireflies where I live, at least I didn't think. I thought they were so cool, so I just continued staring at them, trying to figure out what they were. Now, the way my house was set up, my bedroom window faced the forest and my back garden, and directly next to my room is a side gate that links to the front part of the house. On either side of the gates are motion sensor lights. So, the lights in the forest may not have been paranormal, but what happened next most definitely was. The motion at the front of the gate triggers, casting a faint light into my garden. The night grows really silent. No more owls or crickets, and is just really eerie. The lights in the same forest seem to ebb and flow, and then just die out. I listen carefully as I start to hear scuttling on the wood of the gate. It's muffled, so I slightly crack open my window to get a better look and listen. Now that gate is always locked, with a heavy-ass padlock at that. To this day, I have asked my dad if he has ever left the gate unlocked that night, and he stands by the fact that unless he's gardening, the gate stays closed. This was spring, so he might have started seeding, so for my own comfort of mind, I'm gonna assume he left the gate open. Anyway, I hear the gate slowly swing open. The creaks of the wood were so loud against the silent night, so the sound was very distinctive. The motion light right underneath my bedroom window switches on. Honestly, to this day, I can't really explain what I saw. It was this off-white, veiny kind of skin texture and was about the size of a child. It walked on all fours and looked just sickly. Its hind legs were significantly longer than its front legs, and it looked to have hand-like claws. I hate having to link back to creepypasta, but it honestly looked like the Rake. Now, I've gone through the possibilities in my head, trust me. It was too small to be the deer that frequented our garden. Also, it had no remotely deer-like features. A badger or fox with a disease? Possible. However, I've never seen badgers or foxes with such long limbs and so disproportionate. Also, this thing was completely hairless and very human-like. The worst part about it to me was how it slowly and silently moved up to my garden path before disappearing into the woods. The noises of the night started back up after that, but I was so shook up that I didn't sleep that entire night. I'm from England, so I haven't heard of any folklore that matches what I saw. I know there were occult practices done in the woods behind my house, but I'm pretty sure it was pagan, hence not inherently bad or demonic. I don't know what I saw, honestly. Any ideas? Some context. This happened like 10 years ago, on a hill southwest from Colombia. I'm skeptical about a lot of things, but this, I'm absolutely sure what I saw there was real. I was camping with my Boy Scout troop in a not-so-friendly place. Very, very hot. Really rough terrain. Awfully humid. Our troop was more likely military service than scout life. It was kind of far away from the main road, and the main base was in a tree-covered hill. I think that could be worth noted that it is less than 5 kilometers from an indigenous sacred site known as the Sacred Territory of the Creator, and probably it is a sacred site to, I don't know, since the tribes that inhabited the area were forced by the Spanish to abandon their belief, traditions, and language, so there's a lot of things we don't know about them, even I being a descendant of them. It was 3 p.m., and we sent 3 people to do the dishes after lunch. There was a small lagoon, 5 to 10 minutes downhill. It shouldn't take more than a half an hour for them to be back. An hour passes. They haven't came back. Knowing them, surely they're just having a trivial and boring gossip conversation. But as a patrol leader, I have to call them back. They didn't respond to whistles, so I personally went downhill to find them. The way to the lagoon is mostly a 2.5-foot path between a steep hill and a dry river with dense vegetation and closed curves. I was walking carelessly until I noticed something behind a curve. At first, I thought it was a really massive vulture, but I felt uneasy, so I started going back in silence until I stepped over a dry branch. After the crackling, the thing extended its wings, showing a very muscular humanoid back, and then a head that watched me. Then, it took off with a sound more like a helicopter than a bird. Nonsense, I thought. There must be a rational explanation. Maybe it was just my imagination. I arrived to the lagoon and effectively, they were having the most boring and dumb of conversations. I told them to pack everything and started going back to the campsite. When all of the troop came out of the tree-covered area, the lagoon is in a clear, and told me that I was taking too long. My encounter with the Birdman shouldn't have taken me more than 5 seconds, or so I thought. Anyway, there was a very cocky boy in the troop that said, "I'll go front," and entered alone in the woods. 5 seconds later, I heard the same helicopter-like sound, and the boy came running from the woods, hyperventilating. "Scouter, I saw a man with wings." Of course, everybody laughed, but I didn't say a word. This happened when I was really young. I was around 6 to 9 years old. A little backstory. I had a significant trauma happen to me when I was 6 years old. I don't want to go into details, but it made my life really difficult for a while. I totally shut down for a bit, and sleep at time was my only safe haven. For the next couple of years after my incident, my dreams just got stranger and stranger. I at first only saw them in the background of my dreams, like part of the scenery almost. Then, I began to have lucid dreams. All of a sudden, these dark shadow people with red eyes began to manifest in my room. I never felt danger from them, and that gave me a sense of relief. I would talk to them like they were someone I knew, and I would tell them about my day. A lot of times, these conversations would end because they would hear something and move off my bed. I would go wake from my semi-asleep state by trying to go after them. Towards the end of my encounters with these creatures, I got a sense of terror, and I can never pinpoint it until one night, a white figure came through my door and reached out with a knife toward me. I woke up with a jolt and never saw any of them again, though I will sometimes see one of them dart out of my vision. Hi, I've got kind of a strange thing that's bugged me for going on probably 10 years now. So, growing up, I always felt like my parents' house was haunted. I always experienced weird things, seen shadows, and just felt uneasy. I also experienced sleep paralysis very frequently. I didn't know what it was back then, and I thought I was being specifically targeted. At night, it was like a black cloud hovering around the ceiling of the bedrooms, and I kind of remember seeing eyes. I also always got a very uncomfortable feeling going down into the basement and coming back up, like the black cloud from the nighttime was chasing me up the stairs or something. Anyway, these were quote-unquote normal experiences for me growing up, as they were so frequent. However, there was this one time that really freaked me out, and I cannot for the life of me find any kind of information on it. So, what happened was, I was about 16 years old enough to drive anyways. My parents were out in town for the night, and I'd met them for a bit on my way home from work, and then proceeded to go home myself. It was wintertime, and to save heat, we had blocked off the second story of our house. I had to get something that was in my upstairs bedroom, so I opened the partition we had blocking off the stairs. When I opened the partition, there was this thing sitting on the stairs. The best way I can describe it was kind of like a gargoyle. It was hunched over and just sitting there on the stairs, eye level. It was big, adult-sized, but scrawny, dark, had wings. I can't recall if it made a noise. I freaked out and ran and locked myself in another room while I called my parents. I was in full panic mode. I had never seen it before or since. It still bugs me to this day. I remember it so vividly. And being that it was about 10 years ago, my younger sister has since described something similar. I had never told her the story before. I have searched and searched, and the only things I can find are things about the Mothman or about gargoyles outside. Anyway, I thought I'd share because it still bugs me. I'm wondering if anyone else has experienced something similar. My parents don't believe in me or are just in denial of whatever is going on there, but I know what I saw. Some of the stories I have recently heard have had a skinwalker tapping on someone's window, and then they look and see it there. I was being paranoid and imagining, what if that happened to me? I don't know if anyone else has had this feeling, but I feel like I can sense presences around me. It's weird, but right now I'm on my bed with my window right next to me. If it was open, I could hop out in just 2 seconds, and it's like I project this detection thing outwards, and I don't feel anything. It definitely puts me at ease. Of course, that could just be my overactive imagination, but if I ever feel like I feel a presence, I'm going to sleep in my bathroom and hope for the best. That aside, over 2, maybe even 3 years, I think I was in my room, and it was late. My brother was there with me, and we were playing games together or something. Maybe he was actually asleep. I don't remember for sure. It might have happened 2 nights in a row, but I heard this tapping on the window. Now, mind you, the tapping sounds like it was from about the middle of the window, which I'd guess is around 6 to 8 feet high, maybe. I had thought maybe it was pebbles being thrown at the window, or something tapping on it maybe. I don't know why I didn't think of it before, but unless somebody had brought pebbles from somewhere else, there aren't tiny pebbles anywhere near my house. I was trying to record it, but I remember that every time I did it, it stopped for a while. Either that or it couldn't be heard. I don't know if somebody else or somehow skinwalkers make you feel like you need to check, but I felt no compulsion whatsoever to pull back the curtains. I think the most terrifying thing about doing that would be the fact that something would have to be close enough to your window for the light inside to reflect off of it, for it to even be visible, and it would be all you can see with blinding darkness behind it. I don't know what else it could be. There's a possibility it might have been one of my older brothers, but I don't think so, and I don't even remember for sure if he was there at the time. If so, he was in this shed room thing I have outside the house, and not with me. What do you think? Do skinwalkers actually ever tap on windows at all? I made a post here yesterday, or maybe the day before, about a possible sound that was a skinwalker. I don't think that was one. I definitely feel like this has a higher possibility. Again, I live in the southern part of the US. Don't know if any skinwalker sightings or encounters from here are real. I do remember 2 stories that I heard on YouTube from my state. Whether it was or not, I'm wondering if it was, and because I never pulled back the curtains, it lost interest? My brother did hear the tapping, by the way. It wasn't loud or anything. It was loud enough for me to hear over whatever we were doing. He didn't hear it at first, and then I told him to be quiet when it started again, and then he heard it. I know that in a lot of the stories, people often feel they're being watched or something. I didn't feel that. Maybe there was the smallest feeling of there's something out there, but it could have just been me freaking out. Also, I just heard this story earlier, and I'll make it short, but this guy, supposedly a skinwalker, walked over to their campfire in human form, and he had stared at them all while they were asking him if he was okay and what he wanted, or something like that. As I'm typing this, I might have just heard a small tap on my window. If I hear one again, I'm leaving this room. Anyway, one of the kids asked him his name, and he stared at him for a bit, and then said, "That's none of your business." Then he left. Is there some significance to their name? I remember reading on here a link or somewhere that they don't have names or something like that. I don't know. Hey guys, Bradley here. So recently, I posted a story about a supposed skinwalker sighting that I had had. A lot of people started mentioning something called a DOGMAN, which a few believe is what I saw. And if I'm honest, I'm not sure if I disagree, but at the same time, I kinda do agree. It's kind of like one of those, I know I saw something and believe it's this, but at the same time, it looks like this kind of situation. Which is why I'm upwhere in the same spot where I saw this skinwalker or dogman. Please know that I will be documenting this live as it happens. Unfortunately, I don't have very good reception up here, so I'm currently typing in my notes and will post this later when I get back home. I will be updating this document every 45 minutes to an hour. I got one of my friends up here. We'll call him Luke with me for safety. He might put some updates in here or there, but he said it's my story, so he'll leave most of it to me. Also, I will be mostly using my voice with these updates, and I won't be doing them every time. Only when the situation requires, like if we need to be attentive to what's around us. So, without further ado, let's do this. 12:30 a.m. So we have just made it back to the so-called broccoli tree, which is the tree me and my uncle hung out in all the time before he joined the army. I'm not surprised that everybody except the tarp is almost completely gone from rot and bugs. I'll just pull everything out that's rotted and toss it aside. I did bring up a sleeping bag with me, so that me and Luke can use that as a blanket to sit on. I'm going to go ahead and take a small nap. I'll update when I wake up. Will be about 1 hour from now. 1:10 a.m. Little before an hour, but Luke just woke me up to some noises nearby. Could just be a deer, or maybe some other animal. I'm not really sure. Okay, it stopped moving. I think it's on the other side of the tree, where the trunk is. Wait, that's definitely not an animal. Guys, we just heard this thing, whatever it is, growl a really low growl. Almost like it's in pain. Okay, it's been about 2 minutes. This thing is still on the other side of the tree. Wait. It just took off into the woods. It sounded to be on 2 feet. Guys, I don't know what the hell that was, but it definitely was not a human or any known animal. This thing sounds massive. Okay, I'm going to take a little peek outside the tarp. Okay, it seems to have gone away. I'm going to step out and start exploring some more. We'll update soon. 2:30 a.m. Okay, so we've just made it back to the tree. So, there are definitely more than one of these things because we can hear them communicating back and forth from hilltop to hilltop. Seems to be about 2 or maybe 3. Still haven't laid eyes on one of them yet. Luke is going to take his nap now. I have to watch. What is it about these woods? Just the energy around them. I mean, hell, I've had 2 different experiences up here. One of them was a Bigfoot. I just don't understand why. Yet at the same time, I don't know what I'm trying to understand. It just seems like something isn't right about the woods. How can 2 completely different legends that many believe to be nothing more than a hoax exist in the same woods? Could it have been a skinwalker all along who shape-shifted into a Bigfoot? Or is there an skinwalker and a Bigfoot up here? These are things I need to know. I have to know the truth. 3:30 a.m. So Luke has just woken up from sleeping. It seems kind of fitting that he woke up at this time, because 3 a.m. is the devil's hour. Maybe something will happen, and I pray it doesn't cause us harm. I need another nap. I'll be back later. Hello y'all, Luke speaking. No, that's not my real name. I asked Bradley how to do this, and he said to just say what's on your mind and anything that happens. Anyway, it's really creepy up here. Like no joke, it feels like I'm playing a real-life version of Dead by Daylight. It's got me on the edge like crazy. I would say I'm a little scared, but at the same time, I do have Bradley. I know he didn't mention having a gun with us. I guess it's just one of those minor details that some people sometimes skip over. We've heard of a lot of noises up here, some of which could explain right of the bats and others we had listened to for a little while to figure out what it was. And then we have the ones we totally cannot explain. We've heard almost like a howl, but it's at like a much lower tone, with more bass to it per se. It could be what we're up here looking for. It's all quiet right now, but that can change any moment. I could feel that something's about to happen. 3:45 a.m. Guys, that came out of nowhere. What Luke tells me is that we're putting on an entry or something, and then all of a sudden, we came under attack. It seems to have calmed down and, guys, something's on the other side of the tarp. I don't know what it is, but it's on 2 feet. It has red eyes. I have to keep my voice low right now, so I apologize if the microphone doesn't pick up everything I'm saying. It's right there, right there. I know now to be quiet. I'm scared. You gotta be quiet, bro. It'll hear us. Dude, I think it went away. Go look. No, you go look. Bradley, you're the closest to the gun. Go look. Fine, I'll look. Wait right there. Okay, I think it's gone. Let's get the hell out of here. 4:25 a.m. Okay, so I'm back home. Luke just left. Oh boy, guys, what a night. It's been crazy. A lot of unexplained stuff happened. I'm also kind of dumb. My little dumbass didn't record or take any pictures like I had told myself I would do. I feel stupid now. I can already see the people in the comments saying it's fake. Anyway, I believe that's it. All I have to do is copy and paste this, and I hope you all enjoyed and have a great day. I live in the countryside. Me and my brother were walking back home, and it was a few minutes past midnight. There is no houses beside where we live, just fields, bushes, and trees. We were walking, and I felt like something was wrong. I felt like something was watching us, but I didn't think too much of it. Then we heard a noise, and I can't explain it because it was nothing that I had heard before. My brother said it was a faraway gunshot, and I just believed him. He later said that he just said it to calm me down. We kept walking with the flashlight on, and he put some music on to try and make me calm. At one point, I look on my right, and I see this flashlight, like a person was holding it, but you could clearly see there was no one holding it. My brother turned off the flashlight, and we kept looking at it. The light turned into two, and it seemed like it was a car which turned toward us. The light went over us like somebody was pointing flashlights. We panicked, but didn't move. A few seconds later, the lights disappeared. We started to walk faster towards our house, but coming over the hill, we seen this creature on the left side of the road, just completely still. My brother didn't wear glasses at the time, and he said he just saw something like an orb changing forms, but I was wearing glasses, and what I seen still makes me want to puke. I saw a luminescent humanoid, like being, which was something I never saw before. The thing started changing its forms and became something like a fox, going from one side of the road to the other. At this point, we were freaking out. I started to run towards the house as it was just a few meters away, but my brother stopped me to calm me down as I was shocked. When this happened, we were in our driveway, and I was with my back to it. He was holding my shoulders, telling me to calm down, but then he looked towards the darkness, and he ran away. I didn't have the balls to look back, so I ran after him and towards the door. He gave me the key, and I tried to open the door with my hands, shaking, which was absolutely hard. He said that he had seen the creature standing up, and that he looked like a man, but said it wasn't a man at all. Did anybody have any encounters like this? This happened last night, and I still can't explain what happened. I'm shocked. I have a story. It isn't mine, but it happened to my uncle. He used to tell this story when we went camping, and it scared the lights out of me every time I heard it. We live in Utah, and my uncle, Mark, went on a mission at 19. They sent him to an Indian reservation in Arizona. They paired him up there with a companion named Carl. When they first got there, there was a huge rift with the locals on the reservation with them being there. They didn't want my uncle and Carl staying on the reservation grounds. Eventually, they came to a compromise that they would stay on the outskirts in a trailer. This reservation wasn't very big and was located next to a heavily wooded area. The first night, they were trying to all sleep when all of a sudden, their trailer started to shake violently back and forth. Startled and not sure what was happening, they climbed under the table for cover. Mark could distinctly hear somebody pushing it from both sides of the trailer, like a group of people. After about 5 minutes, it stopped. That next day, they made rounds on the reservation and were talking to the locals. Carl made a comment to one of the families that their trailer was shaking that night before. The family got very quiet and then told them that they had to leave. They thought it was strange but didn't think much of it. The next night it happened again. They awoke to their trailer shaking back and forth. Again, they climbed under the table until it stopped. This went on for about 2 more nights. Anytime they tried to talk to anyone about it, they got quiet and told them to leave. Mark started thinking that, due to the tension of their arrival, the locals were doing this to scare them off the reservation. They then go into a convenience store, and they were talking together about how frustrated they were in the situation. The clerk overheard and said, "They can't talk about it. It's forbidden." Confused, they asked him, "Can't talk about what?" The guy continues to tell them about skinwalkers. He says they are evil demons that were once Native American witches. If they talk about it, the skinwalkers will come for their souls. They just walked out of there, baffled. They thought it was another scare tactic. So, that night, when the shaking started again, my uncle decided to be brave and confront them. He went to the trailer door, flew it open, and yelled, "Hey!" When he did that, he saw these 3 animals run off. 2 were a wolf, 1 was a bear, but they looked strange, almost with human features. As he watched them run towards the tree, all 3 of them stood up on 2 legs and walked slowly towards the trees, making a human cackling laugh. It scared him so bad that they called their mission president the next morning and asked to be moved. They were relocated that same day. For a year, nothing happened. One day, they announced that Carl was being relocated to another city, and Mark was getting a new companion, Jimmy. They had to drive for about an hour to pick Jimmy up from the airport. The road they traveled went through the boundaries of the reservation. They arrived at about 8 p.m. and met Jimmy, and they go to leave. The mission president tells Jimmy, "We are driving through a dangerous area at night, so we can't make any stops. If you need to use the restroom, you need to go now," Jimmy says. "I'm fine." The mission president gets serious enough to even freak out Mark. "I'm not kidding. Go do your business." Jimmy was insistent he was fine, so they hit the road. As they were about 30 minutes into the drive, they were going through the area of the reservation boundaries. Jimmy starts complaining that he needed to pee badly. The mission president says, "We can't stop here. You're just going to have to hold it." Jimmy keeps going on. "I really can't hold it." So the mission president stops the car and says, "Okay, but you will do your business next to the door, and if I say get into the car, you better get into the car fast." With a look of confusion, Jimmy just says, "All right," opens the door, and starts to do his business. About 5 seconds later, the mission president says nothing and just yanks Jimmy into the car and floors it. Jimmy and Mark start freaking out. "What's going on?" The mission president says nothing and just increases his speed. All of a sudden, Mark sees something next to the car to his right. A giant wolf-looking man was running on 2 feet next to the car. Mark looked at the speedometer. They were going well over 60 miles an hour and still increasing. The wolf creature kept right next to the car for 10 minutes until it finally took off into the trees. Shaking, Jimmy gets out of the car when they arrive. They didn't speak through the whole ordeal and says, "What did I just see?" The mission president says, "Next time I tell you to take care of your business, you take care of your business."